The Windsor knot I tied with my own hands was now hanging on her bare collarbone. The cold light from my phone screen cast upon my face. In the Instagram story, the shot was shaky and suggestive. It was a photo visible only to close friends at this moment. A silky, dark blue tie draped across the woman's chest like some kind of sex toy, obscuring the view. The caption read, "Some people use company-wide benefits as an excuse, just to give me an exclusive surprise. Thanks, boss, for the overtime pay." The background of the photo was blurry, but I recognized at a glance the signature velvet drapes of that 3-Michelin-star restaurant. That was the table I had reserved 2 months ago by pulling personal connections to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary. But now, the person sitting there wasn't me. Even more ironic was the massive pink diamond ring on her finger. That was the rare pink diamond I had painfully given up at last quarter's Sotheby's auction, because Joseph said the company's cash flow was tight and I wanted to support his career. So it turns out the R&D costs that caused the company's cash flow problems ended up on his female assistant's hand. I stared at the intricate pattern on that tie, the one I had personally tied this morning while standing in the foyer, straightening Joseph's collar before he left. He had kissed my forehead then, saying I was his strongest support in this lifetime. I didn't cry, didn't even tremble. As the sole heir of the Sterling family, the elite education I received since childhood taught me, in the capital market, emotions are the cheapest liability. I put down my phone and turned on the computer in front of me. As the angel investor and largest shareholder of this billion-dollar tech company, I had the highest administrator privileges in the system. My fingertips flew across the keyboard as I bypassed the CFO directly. That was Joseph's best friend from high school, and accessed the back-end audit logs. Search keyword, Holly. The data that popped up on the screen was like one resounding slap after another. 2 months ago, fall team building expenses, $20,000. The note said it was for a suite at a high-end resort, but when I checked the attendance records for those days, only Joseph and Holly were on the business trip. 1 month ago, employee care allowance, $50,000. The transfer went directly to Holly's personal account, listed as a special contribution bonus. And the most recent one was from a week ago, labeled high-precision optical equipment procurement. The amount reached $1.2 million. The supplier was a shell company registered in Delaware, and though the beneficial owner field was hidden behind layers of disguise, it had nowhere to hide from my forensic accounting software. That was exactly the selling price of this pink diamond. So that's how it was. He was using my money, sleeping with my assistant, and trying to turn me into a fool who was not only betrayed, but also had to foot the bill for his betrayal. I did love Joseph deeply, loved him enough to go against my family's wishes and use my trust fund to pave the way for his startup, loved him enough to willingly stay behind the scenes as a so-called supportive wife. But I loved that proud, clear-headed Victoria Sterling even more. I won't allow anyone to treat me as an ATM and a stepping stone. At this moment, the clock pointed to 10 at night. I picked up my phone and dialed Joseph's number. After 3 rings, the call connected. It was noisy on the other end. I could faintly hear jazz music, the clinking of cutlery, and a woman's coquettish, soft laughter. "Hey, darling." Joseph's voice came through, carrying that deliberately lowered tenderness, the kind that once made me swoon, but now sounded full of false, rotten stench. "Sorry, I'm still working overtime at the office tonight. These investors are so hard to deal with, they keep scrutinizing our Series B funding plan." His lies rolled off his tongue effortlessly, as smooth as if he'd rehearsed them 1,000 times. I leaned back on the Italian custom leather sofa, gazing at the dazzling yet cold Manhattan night view outside the window, my voice so calm it even surprised myself. "Oh, really? Are the investors satisfied with your tie?" The other end of the line went dead silent instantly. Only the jazz music in the background continued to flow tirelessly. "Victoria, what are you talking about? I don't understand." A crack appeared in his voice. "It's fine if you don't understand." I chuckled softly, my fingers gliding lightly across the trackpad, clicking send on both the Instagram screenshot and the back-end financial report PDF. "Check your WhatsApp, Joseph, especially that 1.2 million in optical equipment." At this moment, I could vividly imagine how the color drained from his face in an instant. "That was a company error. Victoria, listen to my explanation. It was a mistake by the finance department." He started rambling incoherently, that confidence he usually had when strategizing on Wall Street completely gone. "Save it, Joseph." I cut him off, my tone cold as a blade. In this market, only retail investors listen to explanations. Market makers only look at results. "I'm giving you 20 minutes. I glanced at the diamond watch on my wrist. "If you don't show up at this apartment within 20 minutes, I'll send this financial audit report with the purchase record of this pink diamond directly to the SEC and the entire board of directors." You know what this means? Embezzlement, securities fraud, falsified financial reports. This isn't just about divorce, Joseph. This is a federal felony. You'll spend the next 20 years in prison wearing an orange jumpsuit. "Victoria, you can't do this. I'm your husband." He was practically screaming, and in the background came the sound of a chair being knocked over, the noise of him scrambling to his feet in panic. 19 minutes and 50 seconds. I coldly announced the countdown. With that, I didn't give him any chance to beg, and hung up directly. The phone was tossed onto the coffee table by me, making a dull thud. I stood up and walked into the dressing room. The woman in the mirror wearing a silk robe, makeup exquisite, yet her eyes were cold like poison-tempered ice. I took off the robe, changed into a sharply tailored black business suit, and put on those emerald earrings. Since tonight was a showdown, I needed to have the posture of going to battle. Less than 10 minutes later, the piercing sound of a sports car screeching to a halt came from downstairs. When Joseph burst through the apartment door, he looked as pathetic as a drowned dog. That dark blue tie had been yanked all crooked. His forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. And that face, once handsome and charming, praised by countless financial magazines, was now written all over with fear and ferocity. The moment he came in, his eyes locked onto me, trying to rush over and grab my shoulders. "Victoria, have you lost your mind? You sent the audit report to the SEC. Are you trying to destroy the company? That's your blood and sweat, too." I stepped aside to avoid his touch, frowning in disgust. His body carried a mix of expensive cologne, red wine, and that woman's cheap perfume, making me nauseous. "I'm not the one who destroyed the company. It's your greedy hands and your lower half you couldn't keep in check." I sat on the armchair, legs crossed, looking at him like I was evaluating a failed investment. That was just playing along. Holly seduced me. She said it would help me relieve stress. He defended himself eagerly, pushing all the blame away completely. As for that ring, it was just hush money to shut her up. I originally planned to... Enough. I pulled out a document from the folder beside me and threw it at his feet. "I don't want to hear your illogical defense. This document, sign it." Joseph lowered his head and saw the document title clearly: Supplementary Clauses to the Marital Asset Division and Equity Transfer Agreement. His pupils contracted sharply. "What do you mean by this? You want me to leave with nothing?" "Not exactly." I pointed at the document. "Given your serious financial misconduct in order to protect the company's compliance before the IPO, I, as the largest shareholder, demand that all equity under your name be frozen and managed by me on your behalf. At the same time, you need to repay that $1.2 million in company funds, as well as every single cent spent on that woman before. If you sign it, I can temporarily hold off on handing the evidence over to the FBI and only handle it as an internal scandal, leaving you with a last shred of dignity. If you don't sign..." I leaned forward, staring straight into his eyes, and said word by word, "Tomorrow morning's headline will be, Tech rising star Joseph Archer arrested on suspicion of major financial fraud. Joseph stared fixedly at that agreement. It was his lifeline, the power he didn't want to lose. But he also knew that I never joke. People of the Sterling family only bare their fangs when the hunt is over. Victoria, our 5 years together. Can't they outweigh one mistake? He tried to play the emotional card, his eyes slightly red, his acting still on point. Feelings? I laughed, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. Joseph, when you put that pink diamond on her finger, when you used my trust to feed your ambition, our relationship was already settled. Now, the only thing we're going to discuss is business. I kicked the pen over to him. Sign or don't sign. My patience is limited. The air in the living room seemed to freeze. Joseph's heavy breathing echoed in the empty room. He looked at me, his gaze shifting from pleading to resentment, finally turning into desperate resignation. With trembling hands, he picked up the pen. The moment he bent down, watching his pathetic back, the last trace of romantic illusion in my heart shattered completely. But I knew this was only the beginning. A man like Joseph would never accept defeat willingly. The tense line of his jaw as he signed told me he was already scheming how to strike back, and I was already prepared to face his war. After Joseph finished signing, he slammed the pen hard onto the coffee table, with such force it nearly snapped the barrel. He lifted his head, the mask of tenderness on his face completely torn away, revealing a pair of eyes full of sinister malice. "Are you satisfied now?" He gritted his teeth, his voice squeezed out from deep in his throat. "Victoria, you've always been this domineering, this high and mighty. In your eyes, I was never your husband, just a watchdog raised by your family, right?" At this moment, he finally spoke his true feelings. I watched his impotent rage with cold eyes, feeling nothing inside. "If I hadn't treated you as a husband, you would have gone bankrupt and ended up on the streets 3 years ago after your first failed startup. If I treated you like a dog, you'd be in a cage right now, not standing here barking at me." I stood up, smoothing out non-existent wrinkles on my suit dress, my tone indifferent. "Pack your things and move to the guest room. Until the company audit is over, we need to maintain the facade of a model couple to the outside world so as not to affect the stock price. Don't make me throw you out." Joseph glared at me intensely, his chest heaving violently, but ultimately didn't dare say anything more. He turned and stormed into the bedroom, followed by the sound of a door slamming and things being thrown around. I stood in place and took a deep breath. I knew the real battle had only just begun. Although that agreement could temporarily keep him in check under the American legal system, anything could change before the final verdict. Not to mention, there was still Holly. That woman dared to openly provoke me in a post visible only to close friends, which shows she's definitely no pushover. What she wants isn't just money, but status, and even my title as Mrs. Archer. The next morning, I showed up at the company on time as usual. Walking into that skyscraper in the heart of the financial district, all the employees were somewhat surprised to see me. I rarely got involved in daily operations, mostly appearing as a behind-the-scenes investor. I walked straight to the CEO's office and pushed open the door. Joseph was sitting there, his face ashen, with obvious dark circles under his eyes. Seeing me come in, he instinctively flinched, but quickly put on a calm front. "Why are you here?" "To take back what belongs to me." I ignored him, walked straight to the desk, and pressed the intercom. "Notify the HR director and the head of legal to be in my office in 5 minutes." Joseph shot to his feet. "What are you going to do?" "Taking out the trash." I turned my head and looked through the gaps in the blinds at the open office area outside. There, Holly was holding a latte, leaning against a male colleague's desk, chatting and laughing. She was dressed extra flashily today, and that non-existent pink diamond necklace around her neck seemed to have become her invisible crown. She still didn't know what had happened last night, still lost in the fantasy of her impending rise to power. 5 minutes later, the HR director and the legal counsel pushed open the door and walked in. Ms. Victoria, Mr. Joseph. The two of them seemed a bit uneasy, clearly sensing the tense atmosphere in the air. I tossed a document I had prepared long ago onto the table. Effective immediately, Executive Assistant Holly Miller is relieved of all duties. The reasons are serious violations of company financial policies, conflict of interest, and... I paused, my gaze sweeping over Joseph's pale face. Suspected commercial fraud. What? The HR director's jaw dropped in shock, but Miss Holly was personally promoted by Mr. Joseph. That's why I need to remind everyone. I cut him off, my voice not loud but carrying an unquestionable authority. The controlling shareholder of this company is Sterling Trust. In this room, I am the only investor. If you have any doubts about my decision, I don't mind replacing you too. The HR director immediately shut his mouth, cold sweat trickling down his forehead. Also, I turned to legal, freeze Holly's company account access immediately, confiscate her access card and company computer, and draft a lawyer's letter to recover all non-salary company transfers under her name, totaling $175,000. Tell her, if she doesn't pay it back, we'll see her in federal court. Joseph stood to the side, his fists clenched so tight they crackled, but he never spoke up to stop it. He knew that any attempt to defend Holly now would become new evidence for me to send him to prison. Go handle it. I waved my hand. 10 minutes later, a commotion came from the office area outside. I stood behind the one-way glass, coldly watching the scene unfold. 2 security guards were dragging Holly out. The coffee in her hand had spilled all over the floor, and her once exquisite makeup was now terribly distorted. She was screaming, struggling, shouting like a shrew. "Let go of me! Do you know who I am? I'm Joseph's girlfriend. Where is he? I want to see him." The entire office area was dead silent, everyone watching this spectacle. Holly's gaze suddenly cut through the crowd and locked onto this office. She seemed to have spotted me behind the glass, her eyes becoming incredibly venomous. She tried to rush over like a madwoman, but was mercilessly dragged into the elevator by the guards. What a spectacular performance! I turned around, looking at Joseph, whose face had turned ashen. Seems like your taste is pretty poor, whether it's picking projects or picking women. Joseph slumped into his chair, head in his hands. Victoria, you've gone too far. Humiliating her like this will ruin my reputation too. Your reputation? I sneered. Your reputation was built on my father's connections and my money. Since I gave it to you, I have every right to take it back. After dealing with Holly, I didn't feel relieved. My instincts told me this wasn't going to end that easily. Sure enough, that afternoon, unusual activity started appearing on social media. Several so-called career bloggers and equality warriors with millions of followers suddenly posted content in perfect coordination. Although they didn't name names, all the clues pointed to our company. The headlines were shocking. Real-life Wall Street, the control freak wife, and the startup genius who got PUA'd. When capital becomes a tool of violence, the innocent girl publicly humiliated and kicked out of the company. In the articles, Holly was portrayed as a victim who came from a humble background, worked her way into a prestigious company through her own efforts. But because she was too outstanding, she was seen as a threat by her boss's jealous wife and ultimately suffered workplace bullying. And I became the vicious first wife who relied on family power, was overbearing and unreasonable, with an extreme need for control. What was even more terrifying was that the articles came with some out-of-context chat records and recordings. In the recordings, there was my voice sternly criticizing Joseph over project progress from before, edited to make it sound like I was personally attacking his character. The comment section exploded instantly. "Oh my God, rich women like this are so terrifying. They don't treat people as human beings at all." Support sis in suing. We can't let capitalists bully people like this. So the so-called model couple was all an act, that poor guy. He probably can't even breathe right in front of this woman. Watching the hateful comments popping up nonstop on my phone, I understood. This was Joseph and Holly's counterattack. Joseph may be a coward, but he's good at manipulating public opinion. He knows he can't beat me head on, so he wants to use the current hate the rich and sympathize with the weak mentality to push me to the opposite side of the public, force me to compromise, and even use this opportunity to force me to give up control in order to protect the company's reputation. There was a knock on the office door, and my personal assistant walked in looking anxious. Miss Victoria, the PR department's phones have been blowing up. The stock price has already dropped 5% in after-hours trading. Several investors who were originally interested have also sent emails asking about the situation. I looked at the gradually darkening sky outside the window, a cold smirk curling at the corner of my lips. A PR war? Fine. Since you want to play these dirty tricks, I'll show you what real capital tactics look like. I took out my phone and dialed a number. It was Dante Russo, the top private security consultant in all of New York and a former senior FBI agent. He was the kind of person who walked the line between black and white. As long as the price was right, he could dig up any secrets someone wanted to bury in hell. "Hello, Dante," I said into the phone. "I've got a big job to discuss with you. Help me dig into 2 people. I want all their dirt from childhood to now, including every fake identity they've ever used, every text message they've deleted." A low, raspy voice came from the other end of the phone. "The Archers. Things are pretty heated online right now." "No," I corrected. "It's Joseph Archer and Holly Miller. I don't just want to investigate their present. I also want to investigate their past. Especially that Holly, I don't believe an assistant who only graduated 2 years ago could have such deep scheming and tactics. Look into her background. I want to know who she really is." "No problem, Victoria. You know my rules. Double the price. I want to see results before the board meeting in 1 week. Deal." Hanging up the phone, I looked at those unbearable insults on the screen, my gaze growing even colder. "You think public opinion is your protective umbrella? Number. When the tide recedes, it will become the final wave that drowns you. The board meeting in 1 week will be the decisive moment of this war. Since Joseph wants to kick me out, I will personally bury all his ambitions on the stage he cares about most." Over the next 3 days, I felt as if I was at the center of a carefully orchestrated storm. Online public opinion continued to ferment. Holly opened a new account on TikTok called Broken Butterfly. She didn't show her face, only posting videos of herself eating instant noodles in a cheap apartment, staring blankly out the window, accompanied by sad music and cryptic captions. "Left that suffocating golden cage. Though I have nothing, I have gained freedom." Some people are born in Rome, yet use all their strength to trample those struggling in the mud. These videos quickly garnered millions of views. The comment sections were flooded with sympathy for her and curses at me. Someone even started the #, boycott Sterling Capital #, calling for a boycott of all businesses under my family's name. Meanwhile, Joseph played the role of the silent victim. He still came to the office on time every day, wearing the Xenia suit I'd bought him, only with his tie changed to a dull gray. Facing the strange looks from employees and the barrage of media cameras, he maintained a restrained silence throughout. That look of wanting to speak but holding back was more devastating than any accusation could ever be. He deliberately avoided me in the company, yet frequently made private contact with other board members. I knew it. He was canvassing for votes. He was trying to use this wave of public opinion to launch a coup at the upcoming board meeting. "Victoria, things aren't looking good." Thursday night, my legal counsel's voice was grave over the phone. According to inside sources, at least 3 board members have privately expressed their support for Joseph. They're worried your negative image will affect the company's upcoming IPO. Some have even proposed that you temporarily step down from management and let Joseph take full control to appease the public's anger. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of my apartment, swirling the whiskey glass in my hand, watching the ice cubes collide in the amber liquid. This is exactly what Joseph wanted, I said coldly. He wants to kill with a borrowed knife, using this wave of public opinion to force my hand. Those old fossil board members only care about stock prices. As long as the stock price stays stable, they couldn't care less about what the truth is. So what are you planning to do? Should you release a statement to clarify? Clarify? Releasing a statement at a time like this will only be interpreted as corporate arrogance. I tilted my head back and drained the glass. No, I need to make them think I'm panicking, that I've run out of options. Only then will Joseph reveal more of his weaknesses. After hanging up the phone, the doorbell rang. Dante Russell had arrived. He was wearing a black leather jacket carrying a faint scent of tobacco. He didn't waste words, directly handing me a USB drive. "Everything you wanted is in here." His voice was husky, with a hint of amusement. "Victoria, you'd never guess who this Holly really is." I plugged in the USB drive and clicked open the folder inside. As the files opened one by one, my pupils gradually dilated. So that's how it was. Holly Miller, real name Jessica Jones. 5 years ago, she was arrested in New Jersey on suspicion of credit card fraud, later released due to insufficient evidence. After that, she changed her name, forged Ivy League credentials, and mingled at cocktail parties of major tech companies, a professional, high-class hunter. But what shocked me even more was an audio file. It was a phone call recording between Joseph and Holly from half a year ago. That old hag's family trust has too many restrictions. I can't touch the big money at all. This Series B funding is an opportunity. We can set up an offshore account and launder some of the funds out. Joseph, are you sure? That's a federal felony. What's there to be afraid of? As long as we move fast enough, then dump the mess on her after the IPO. Then we'll go to the Cayman Islands and live like gods. That control freak woman. I'm so sick of her holier-than-thou face. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from anger, extreme anger. So it turned out this wasn't just an affair. This was an out-and-out conspiracy. From the very beginning, Joseph had been scheming against me, against my family, against every penny I had. He didn't just want to ruin my marriage. He wanted me to take the fall, counting his money from behind bars. "How did you get this recording?" I asked Dante. "Jessica." "Oh no, Miss Holly has a habit of keeping backup plans." Dante shrugged. "She backed all of this up to the cloud, probably thinking that if Joseph ever dumped her, she could still use it for blackmail. Too bad her password was way too simple." I stared at that folder on the screen like looking at a fully loaded Gatling gun. With this, it's enough to send them on a honeymoon to federal prison. I closed the laptop and turned to Dante. "Thank you, Dante. Send me the bill. Double it." "Happy to be of service," Dante said with a smile, then stopped at the door. "By the way, I heard a little rumor. I heard that Joseph is going to propose removing you from your chairman position at tomorrow's board meeting. He's even prepared a PowerPoint presentation detailing your poor decision-making and mental instability." "Mental instability?" I scoffed. "Then let him see what a crazy woman can do." Friday, the boardroom. The long mahogany conference table was surrounded by people. The atmosphere was so heavy it was suffocating. Joseph sat across from me. He had specially gotten a new hairstyle today, looking radiant, completely different from his dejected state a few days ago. His eyes flickered with barely concealed excitement and greed. Holly didn't show up, but her shadow was everywhere. On the large screen in the conference room, the company's stock price trend chart from the past 2 days was prominently displayed, a shocking downward curve. "Ladies and gentlemen," Joseph stood up first, clearing his throat, "today's meeting has only one agenda item, the emergency adjustment of the company's management." He pressed the remote in his hand, and a photo of me appeared on the screen, accompanied by screenshots of those negative comments from the internet. "It pains me," he said in a tone of compassionate sorrow. "Due to Ms. Victoria's improper handling of her personal life, she has brought a huge reputational crisis to the company. As the company's CEO and also her husband, I tried to resolve this privately, but unfortunately, Ms. Victoria's emotions seem to be somewhat out of control." Several directors whispered among themselves, casting questioning looks at me. "In order to protect the interests of the shareholders and to ensure the smooth progress of the IPO," Joseph raised his voice, "I propose that Ms. Victoria's position as chairwoman of the board be temporarily suspended, and that I assume all decision-making authority until her mental state stabilizes." The conference room fell into dead silence. Everyone looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I sat at the head of the table, still in my black business suit, my face showing no expression. "Are you done?" I asked calmly. Joseph was stunned for a moment, then straightened his back. "Victoria, this is for the good of the company. I hope you can understand." "For the good of the company?" I chuckled softly and stood up. I didn't refute his accusations, nor did I defend myself. I simply turned around and inserted the USB drive in my hand into the conference room's multimedia port. "Since everyone's here, why don't we watch something more interesting together?" I pressed the play button. On the screen, it was no longer stock price charts, nor internet screenshots, but detailed bank statements one after another, forged academic certificates one by one, and that recording that was enough to damn Joseph beyond redemption. That old hag, money laundering, Cayman Islands. Joseph's voice echoed clearly in every corner of the conference room. In that instant, Joseph's face went from ruddy to deathly pale, then from deathly pale to ashen. His whole body froze in place, as if struck by lightning. This is fake. This is AI generated," he screamed hysterically, trying to rush over and yank out the USB drive. But the two security personnel behind me had already stepped forward, pinning him down firmly. Whether it's fake or not, the FBI's technical experts will make that determination. I looked at him coldly. Joseph Archer, suspected of securities fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and forging business documents. I turned to look at those dumbfounded board members. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the real cause of the company's crisis. A parasite trying to hollow out the company, a fraudster full of lies. Now I propose that we immediately remove Joseph Archer from all his positions and hand over all evidence to the judicial authorities. Who's in favor? Who's against?" My gaze swept over everyone present. No one dared to speak. Those board members who had originally supported Joseph now wished they could bury their heads in the table. Passed unanimously. I rapped on the table, sealing the decision. Joseph slumped in his chair like a puddle of mud, still muttering to himself, "Impossible. This can't be." Just then, the conference room door was pushed open. Several agents wearing bulletproof vests marked FBI strode in. "Joseph Archer," the lead agent flashed his credentials, "you're under arrest." The moment the cold handcuffs locked around Joseph's wrists, he jerked his head up, his eyes filled with despair and defiance. "Victoria, you vicious woman, you planned this all along. You deliberately made me walk right into this." I walked up to him and looked down at him from above. "No, Joseph, you were just too greedy." I leaned close to his ear and spoke in a voice only the two of us could hear. "Oh, right, forgot to tell you. Your little butterfly, Holly, oh no, Jessica, was arrested half an hour ago. She's in the interrogation room, and she's confessed everything." Joseph's pupils instantly went unfocused. When he was dragged away, he was like a dead dog. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the flashing police lights below, watching the man who once swore to love me forever being shoved into a police car. There was no thrill in my heart like I had imagined, only a weariness of everything finally settling. But I knew this was far from over. Public opinion online was still fermenting, and the company's stock price was still falling. Cleaning house was only the first step. Next, I would rebuild my empire on these ruins. The footage of Joseph being taken away by the FBI made headlines on every major news network in America within an hour. Number tech mogul arrested for massive fraud. Number sterling heiress strikes back from the brink. Number sign fake socialite. Holly's true identity. Exposed number sign. Public opinion did a complete 180-degree turn in an instant. That broken butterfly who was playing the victim on TikTok had her account banned instantly. As for those bloggers who attacked me before, they either deleted their posts and apologized or played dead and didn't respond. But I didn't have time to enjoy this victory. The company was now a complete mess. Investors were pulling out, partners were watching from the sidelines, and employees were panicking. I had to stabilize the situation in the shortest time possible. For the next 48 hours, I barely closed my eyes. I held an all-hands meeting, disclosed all the investigation results, and promised to use my personal trust fund to back the company, ensuring every employee's salary and bonus would be paid on time. I personally flew to Silicon Valley and Boston, visiting each of the core investors who wanted to pull out one by one. I showed them the company's real technological reserves and future development blueprint, using my family's reputation as a guarantee for the company. "Victoria, we're investing in Joseph, not you," a senior venture capitalist said casually from his golf cart. "He may be a jerk, but he has technical vision. You're just a socialite." Those words stung me like needles. Yeah, in everyone's eyes, I was just Miss Sterling with a pretty resume and expensive jewelry. "Mr. Peterson," I looked into his eyes and said with neither servility nor arrogance, half of Joseph's eye for technology was based on the industry analysis reports I provided him. That cloud architecture project that earned you 5 times the return. I discovered it in my advisor's lab at MIT. In this circle, no one is anyone's accessory. My money is old money, but I am new blood. I took out a detailed restructuring proposal and handed it to him. "Give me 6 months. If the stock price doesn't return to its original level, I'll buy back all the shares you hold at a 20% premium." The big shot took the proposal, flipped through a few pages, and his gaze gradually became serious. "Interesting." He closed the document and sized me up again. "Looks like we all misjudged you. All right, Victoria, I'll bet on you this once." With the investors handled, next was dealing with the legal mess Joseph left behind. Although Joseph was arrested, he didn't plead guilty. He hired the most expensive criminal defense lawyer team in all of New York, attempting to mount a not guilty defense. His lawyers claimed that the $1.2 million was a secret investment verbally authorized by me, and that those recordings were illegally obtained evidence that couldn't be admitted in court. What was even more disgusting was that they tried to throw the dirty water back on me, implying that I fabricated evidence to frame him because I was jealous of my husband's affair. "Victoria, the situation is a bit complicated." My lawyer furrowed his brow. "If the recordings are excluded, relying solely on financial evidence, it'll be hard to convict him of a serious crime. At most, he'll get a few years, maybe even probation." "Absolutely not," I said resolutely. "I want him to rot in prison." I found Dante again. I need more evidence, the kind that can nail him dead to rights. Dante was silent for a moment, then said, "There's someone who might be able to help." "Who?" "Joseph's former CFO, the scapegoat he fired, David Cohen." David Cohen was once Joseph's high school friend and a founding member of the company. But 6 months ago, after he questioned a suspicious transfer by Joseph, he was kicked out of the company by Joseph under the pretext of incompetence. I found David. He was living in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn, making ends meet by delivering food. Seeing me, he seemed very resistant. "I have nothing to do with Sterling Company anymore. Please leave." "David, I know you were wronged." I stood in the shabby hallway, looking at him sincerely. "Joseph ruined your career. Now I want to give you a chance for revenge and a chance to clear your name." David hesitated for a long time, but eventually let me in. Actually, I kept a backup plan. He pulled out a dust-covered box from under the bed. Inside was an old laptop. Every time Joseph forced me to cook the books, I secretly backed up the original data, and I also kept records of the instructions he sent me through encrypted emails. Looking at those shocking instruction emails on the screen, I breathed a long sigh of relief. This was solid proof. Even if Joseph had connections reaching the heavens, he couldn't escape this time. With the ironclad evidence David provided, I walked into the federal prosecutor's office once again. This time, Joseph's defense team was completely silenced. In the face of the complete email chain and raw data, any quibbling seemed pale and powerless. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Joseph finally broke down. He not only admitted to all the crimes, but also, to save himself, shifted all the blame onto Holly, claiming he had been bewitched and instigated by her. And when Holly found out that Joseph had sold her out, she also went crazy in the interrogation room, spilling all the shady dealings Joseph had done before, even including the scandal of him trying to bribe a congressman. This pair of true lovers who once swore to live and die together put on a spectacular dog-eat-dog show in front of the iron fist of the law. The day the final verdict came down was a drizzly afternoon. I sat in the front row of the gallery wearing a black trench coat as if attending a funeral. The judge struck the gavel. Defendant Joseph Archer, guilty of securities fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, with cumulative sentencing, is hereby sentenced to 18 years in prison, with confiscation of all personal illegal gains and a fine of $5 million. Defendant Jessica Jones, alias Holly, guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of documents, is hereby sentenced to 6 years in prison. When the bailiff escorted Joseph past me, he stopped in his tracks. In just a few months, he seemed to have aged 10 years. That face that was once so spirited was now covered with wrinkles and despair. He looked at me, his lips moving slightly, as if wanting to say something, but I didn't look at him. My gaze passed through him, toward the solemn doors of the courtroom. A beam of light coming through there was shining at my feet. It was the light of freedom and the light of a new beginning. I stood up, straightened my collar, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The rain outside had stopped. Manhattan's skyline glittered under the sunset. I took a deep breath of the moist air. Goodbye, Joseph. Hello, Victoria. Hello, New World. 3 months after Joseph went to prison, Manhattan entered its harshest depths of winter. Although the company had weathered the most dangerous legal and reputation crisis, it was still riddled with problems internally. Those cronies Joseph had planted in various departments didn't dare to openly rebel, but were secretly hindering my reforms through passive resistance and delaying processes. They were still gambling, betting that I, this parachuted-in female boss, wouldn't last through this winter, betting that the board would eventually bring in a professional manager to take over due to performance pressure. Victoria, that new project in the R&D department is behind schedule again. The supervisor says the budget approval is stuck at finance, and finance says the technical specifications are unclear. My new assistant Emily reported cautiously. This is already the 3rd delay this week. I closed the file, my fingertips tapping lightly on the mahogany desk. Get the R&D director and CFO in here. 10 minutes later, 2 middle-aged men walked into the office. They were both old-timers from Joseph's era, wearing that greasy, perfunctory smile on their faces. Miss Victoria, R&D isn't like grocery shopping. It can't be rushed. The R&D director spread his hands. Besides, morale right now, everyone's very worried about the company's future. Exactly, the finance side also needs to stay compliant. The CFO chimed in. After all, such a big incident happened before. Now every single expense has to go through layers of review, so efficiency naturally suffers. I watched them play off each other, sneering inwardly. They were trying to intimidate me. Since morale is low and efficiency is poor, I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, my back to them. Then we'll get a new batch of people with high morale and high efficiency to do the job. The two of them froze. What do you mean? I turned around and tossed 2 termination notices onto the desk. You're fired immediately, right now. You can't do this. The R&D director's face turned red. I have a contract. I'm a core pillar of this company. Firing people so casually like this violates labor laws, and without me, that project can't move forward at all. I've reviewed the non-compete agreement and severance compensation clauses in the contract. The company can afford to pay. My tone was calm. As for the project, I've already poached a new CTO from Silicon Valley. He's having coffee downstairs and will take over in 10 minutes. As for the CFO position, David Cohen will replace you. I think he knows the company's books better than you do. Hearing David's name, the CFO's face instantly turned deathly pale. Security, show them out! This purge was like dropping a depth charge into a calm lake. The entire company now knew that this new boss wasn't the same decorative Voss who only smiled and signed papers at annual meetings. She really dared to act, and she acted without mercy. Those employees who had been watching from the sidelines and slacking off started becoming anxious and jittery, and work efficiency shot straight up. But I knew that fear alone couldn't build an empire. I held an all-hands meeting and announced a new equity incentive plan. The old Archer technology is dead. I stood on stage, looking at hundreds of pairs of eyes below. Starting today, the company is renamed VS, Future Technology. I don't care whose side you were on before. I only look at results. As long as you can create value for the company, I'll give you returns beyond just salary. I'll give you shares and make you true owners of this company. The audience below went from initial dead silence to whispered murmurs and finally erupted into thunderous applause. At that moment, I felt that this teetering giant ship was finally beginning to obey my helm commands, slowly turning around. However, business is like a battlefield. There's never a chance to catch your breath. Just when things inside the company had barely stabilized, the wolf pack outside closed in again. The IPO plan that had been temporarily shelved due to Joseph's scandal became a juicy piece of meat in our competitors' eyes. An industry giant called Titan Tech, taking advantage of our depressed stock price, began aggressively buying up scattered shares on the market and launched a hostile takeover bid. Titan Tech's CEO was a sly old fox named Robert King. He was known on Wall Street for his ruthless tactics, earning him the nickname Corporate Butcher. Miss Victoria, name your price. At a private executive lunch meeting, Robert swirled the wine glass in his hand, his eyes full of contempt. Your company might look decent now, but its foundation is too thin. Add your ex-husband's scandal to that. Tusk, tusk. Market confidence in you is quite fragile. Why not sell the company to me, take a few $100 million to vacation in Europe, find yourself a young, handsome guy? Why put yourself through all this suffering? Every word he said was testing my limits. Mr. Robert, I set down my knife and fork, elegantly dabbing the corner of my mouth with a napkin. I think you've got one thing wrong. VS Tech isn't my burden, it's my weapon. And I certainly don't need those few $100 million to keep some boy toy. As for confidence, I looked straight into his cloudy eyes. Next month's product launch will show you. Product launch? With that half-dead AI project of yours? Robert laughed out loud. Don't be naive, little girl. Business isn't playing house. Then let's wait and see. I stood up and left, leaving Robert sitting there with a gloomy expression. I knew this wasn't just a business negotiation. It was a battle for dignity. For the next month, I practically lived at the company. Together with the new CTO and David Cohen, I led the R&D team working day and night. We restructured the underlying algorithms, scrapped all those fake demos Joseph had cooked up to scam investors, and polished the product for real. Those days were the most exhausting yet most fulfilling time of my life. I was no longer that Miss Sterling who only signed papers and smiled. I was a comrade who ate pizza and pulled all-nighters with everyone. Finally, the day of the product launch arrived. We booked the entire jazz hall at Lincoln Center. Under the spotlight, I walked onto the stage alone, wearing a white suit. No flashy PPT, no sentimental speech. I directly showcased our new product, a real time translation system based on an entirely new neural network architecture. It could not only accurately translate 40 languages, but also capture the speaker's emotions and tone in real time, making the machine's voice sound as emotionally rich as a real person's. During the live demonstration segment, I invited a refugee representative from a war-torn region to tell her story in her native language. The system converted her every sentence, every sob, every glimmer of hope into English in real time, perfectly, spreading throughout the entire venue. At that moment, the whole venue fell silent. Many people were secretly wiping away tears. Then thunderous applause erupted and lasted for a long time. Robert King sat in the audience, his face ashen. He knew the hostile takeover plan had completely fallen through. After the press conference, the company's stock price skyrocketed 30% overnight. Investors' calls flooded my phone again, but this time, not with doubts, but with requests to add more investment. I stood backstage, watching the numbers dancing on the big screen, and took a deep breath. I did it. I not only saved the company, but also gave it a new lease on life. Emily ran over and hugged me excitedly. "Victoria, we did it. You're amazing." I patted her back and said with a smile, "We did it together." Walking out of Lincoln Center, the Manhattan night sky was still dazzling. But this time, the brilliance no longer made me feel cold, because I knew I was also part of this brilliance, and the most dazzling part. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations, Victoria. It seems you learned the lesson I taught you in here quite well." The message was signed, L. Joseph. Was he watching the news in prison, or did someone pass along the message for him? I looked at that text message, and surprisingly, there wasn't a single ripple in my heart. I casually deleted the message and blocked that number. For a loser who was already out of the game, I didn't deign to give him any response. My gaze turned to the front. There, a black sedan was parked by the roadside. The car window rolled down, revealing Dante's chiseled face. "Getting in, Your Majesty." He raised an eyebrow. "The celebration banquet is ready, but I thought maybe you'd rather go have a quiet drink." I smiled. "To the bar." I opened the car door and got into the passenger seat. "Perfect." Dante started the car. The car merged into the Manhattan traffic. In this city filled with desire and ambition, every day someone falls, and every day someone rises. And I, Victoria Sterling, had only just begun my conquest. The success of the product launch had firmly established VS Tech. I became a regular on the covers of major financial magazines, and Forbes even listed me as one of the most influential women business leaders in the world. However, behind the glamour, shadows still lurked. Joseph's text message was like a thorn, pulled out yet still faintly aching. I knew he wasn't behaving himself in prison. Sure enough, a month later, news came from the prison. Joseph, due to his good behavior and through prison labor and reporting others' crimes, had earned an opportunity for sentence reduction. Although it was still a long way before his release, this showed he was still trying to control the situation, or at least he was trying to disgust me. What made me even more alert was that some strange data leaks appeared within the company. Although they were all non-core peripheral data, this indicated that the company's firewall had developed cracks. Found it. Dante placed a report on my desk. It's a cyber attack. The IP address went through multiple proxies and was finally traced to a hacker group in Eastern Europe. Hackers? I frowned. Corporate espionage? Not entirely. Dante pointed at a line of code on the report. "Look here, This is a signature. Ghost. The jobs this group took before were mostly retaliatory attacks against specific targets. Also, someone paid a hefty amount of Bitcoin as commission. You're saying someone paid hackers to mess with me? Very likely. Dante nodded. And the source of this Bitcoin, traced through blockchain, although it was laundered many times, the origin can be traced back to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands, the tax haven that Joseph had mentioned in the recording. I suddenly remembered something. Although most of Joseph's illegal gains were confiscated, does he still have some deeply hidden private stash that hasn't been dug up? Theoretically, yes, Dante said. The FBI isn't omnipotent either. If he gave the private key to someone else before going to prison, to whom? We exchanged a glance and almost simultaneously said a name. Holly. No, to be precise, it was Jessica Jones. Although she was also sentenced because she was an accomplice with a shorter term, and she claimed to suffer from severe depression while in prison, she had just recently been approved for medical parole and is currently receiving treatment at a private sanatorium. It seems our little butterfly didn't break her wings, but instead sharpened her venomous stinger in the shadows. I sneered. Want me to check out that sanatorium? Dante asked. No, that would tip them off. I shook my head. Since they want to play cat and mouse, I'll play along to the end. I didn't strengthen the firewall. Instead, with David Cohen's cooperation, I deliberately left a hidden back door. That back door led to a fake database containing a top-secret file named Project Phoenix. The file described a quantum computing technology capable of changing the world, along with an upcoming multi-billion-dollar financing plan. Of course, it was all fake. It was just bait. For the next 2 weeks, we waited quietly. The fish took the bait, as expected. That ghost hacker organization not only stole the file, but also quickly put this top-secret technology up for public auction on the dark web. The starting bid was as high as $50 million. Meanwhile, Jessica Jones wasn't idle in the nursing home either. She frequently contacted the outside world through encrypted communication software, seemingly planning some big move. She wants to sell this technology to Robert King of Titan Tech. Dante brought the latest intel. Robert King is desperate to find a breakthrough to defeat you, and this quantum technology is too tempting for him. Perfect. I curled the corner of my lips. Then let them buy it. A few days later, news came from the dark web that the file had sold for a high price of $80 million. Although the buyer was anonymous, the fund flow clearly pointed to Titan Tech's affiliated accounts. The moment she received the money, Jessica probably thought she had turned her life around. However, what she didn't know was that the file not only contained fake technology, but also had a tracking Trojan implanted. As soon as the file was opened, the Trojan would automatically activate, not only locking down the other party's system, but also reverse transmitting all the core data from their servers back to me. More importantly, this Trojan would also automatically record the entire transaction process, including the source of funds and the ultimate beneficiary. Just as Titan Tech's engineers excitedly opened the file, ready to study this epic-making technology, their entire internal network instantly crashed. Only a huge red skull remained on the screen, along with a line of text. Greed is the devil. VS. Meanwhile, I had already packaged the evidence of Jessica violating bail conditions, participating in transnational cybercrime, and money laundering, and sent it to the U.S. Marshals Service and her parole officer. This time, no lawyer could save her. That night, Jessica was arrested in a luxury ward at the sanatorium. She was opening champagne at the time, celebrating the fortune she was about to get her hands on. When the police burst in, she completely broke down, screaming as she hurled the bottle at them, cursing my name like a madwoman. And Robert King didn't fare any better, because he used illegal means to purchase trade secrets and caused the company's system to crash with massive customer data leaks. Titan Tech's stock price plummeted. The board of directors urgently initiated an accountability procedure and directly removed him from his CEO position. two birds with one stone. The weekend after everything was resolved, I made a trip to that federal prison. But I didn't go to see Joseph. I just stood on the high ground outside the prison, looking at those gray walls from a distance. I knew Joseph must have already heard about Jessica's fate. She was his last trump card and his last hope. Now that hope was shattered. In there, he would face true despair. No money, no helpers, and possibly even new charges to face, because Jessica, to get her sentence reduced, had ratted him out once again, saying the Cayman Islands account key was actually given by him. This meant his sentence might be extended yet again. The wind blew through my hair. I turned around and got into the car. "Let's go, Dante." "Where to?" "To the airport." I watched the scenery flying by outside the window. I have a speech to attend in Davos. The world is big, and so is my stage. As for those rats in the gutter, let them rot in the gutter. On the private jet to Switzerland, I watched the sea of clouds outside the window. The golden sunlight spilled over the clouds, breathtakingly beautiful. I thought back to many years ago, when Joseph and I first met. Back then, he had pointed at the clouds and told me that one day we would stand at the top of the world. Now I had made it, but he wasn't by my side. But what did that matter? I had learned how to fly higher, farther, all on my own. Because I am Victoria Sterling. I am my own queen. At the snowy peak of the Davos Forum, the air was thin and biting cold. I stood at the podium, facing the world's top political and business leaders, talking about VS Future Tech's exploration in AI ethics. Under the flashlights, I was confident and composed, every pause perfectly timed. After the speech, I was surrounded by crowds. Compliments, invitations, and business cards flew at me like snowflakes. But I noticed someone standing at the edge of the crowd, someone who shouldn't be here. Alexander Volkov, a Russian energy oligarch, a figure with a mixed reputation in international business circles. Rumor had it he played both sides of the law, with methods 100 times more ruthless than Robert King. He wore a dark gray cashmere coat, holding a glass of champagne, watching me with an amused look in his eyes, like a Siberian wolf eyeing its prey. I politely wrapped up my small talk with the others and headed toward the lounge area. As expected, Alexander followed. "Wonderful speech, Miss Sterling." His voice was deep, carrying a thick Eastern European accent. "However, your understanding of ethics seems quite different from the methods you used against your ex-husband." I stopped in my tracks and turned to face him directly. "Mr. Volokov, when dealing with wolves, you use a shotgun. Laws and ethics are reserved for civilized people." He laughed, the sound rumbling from deep in his chest. "That's exactly what I admire about you. Victoria, interested in discussing a business deal about that quantum encryption technology you have?" Alarm bells went off in my head. That quantum technology was a fake bait. Only a few people in the inner circle knew about it, although Titan Tech had to swallow their losses in silence, publicly claiming it was just an ordinary hacker attack without revealing specific details. How did Alexander know? Unless... "I think you've misunderstood. We have no plans to sell our core technology." I refused coldly. "Don't be so quick to refuse." He swirled his wine glass. "I know that technology was your bait, but what interests me more is the Trojan horse you planted. That reverse tracing algorithm capable of penetrating Titan Tech's firewall. Very interesting. I'm willing to offer $200 million for exclusive rights to that algorithm. $200 million. This amount of money was enough to tempt any tech company. But I knew that doing business with someone like him was no different from asking a tiger for its skin. His funds weren't clean, and once tainted, VS Tech would become a money laundering tool, or even be put on the U.S. government's sanctions list. Sorry, VS only does compliant business. I turned to leave. Alexander stepped forward, blocking my path. His presence was overwhelmingly oppressive, the scent of cigars mixed with cold cologne hitting me in the face. "Victoria, you should know, in this world some refusals come with a price." He lowered his voice. I heard your ex-husband is having quite a fulfilling time in prison. If you don't cooperate with me, maybe I can make his time even more fulfilling, or make him shut up forever. After all, dead men don't recant their testimony. He was threatening me. Did he think I was the kind of weak woman who would still compromise for her ex-husband's safety? Or did he think I would kill to silence him? Mr. Volokov. I raised my head, my gaze colder than the snow in Davos. Joseph Archer is just a name from the past to me. Whether he lives or dies in there, whether he recants or stays silent, has nothing to do with me. If you want to make a move, go ahead, as long as you're not afraid of the FBI coming after you. As for threatening me, I stepped closer to him. The last person who threatened me is now facing an 18-year sentence, and the one before that just lost his CEO position. Do you want to be the third? A flash of surprise passed through Alexander's eyes, then turned into admiration, even a hint of excitement? Interesting. He stepped back, raising his glass. It seems the rumors are true. You're not just a pretty vase, but a black rose with thorns. All right, if we can't do business, we can be friends. I don't need friends. With that, I walked straight out of the lounge. Back in the hotel suite, I immediately dialed Dante's number. Look into Alexander Volokov. Why is he interested in our tracking algorithm? Also, increase the company's security level, especially for overseas IP access. Dante's voice was somewhat grave. Victoria, you've gotten yourself into big trouble. Volokov is currently under investigation by Interpol. He urgently needs an anti-tracking system to protect his underground network. The fact that he approached you means he's had his eyes on VS for a long time. I know. I took off my high heels, stepping barefoot onto the carpet. But he underestimated me. He thinks I'm a white swan who can only dance within the rules, but he doesn't know I can roll in the mud too. What do you want to do? Since he wants that algorithm, then give it to him. What? Dante exclaimed. Are you crazy? That's treason. Give him a special edition. I looked at the snow-capped mountains outside the window, a cold smile curling at the corner of my lips. A version that can only run for 72 hours, then self-destructs, and automatically sends a location signal to Interpol before destruction. This move is ruthless enough. Dante laughed, but it's too risky. What if he finds out? Fortune favors the bold. I said, besides, I want to use his hands to completely eliminate those forces still coveting VS in the shadows. Once he gets the algorithm, the other flies won't dare swarm around anymore. After 72 hours, he'll be too busy saving his own skin. Where would he find the energy to cause me trouble? Victoria, you're a natural-born gambler. The next 3 days were a heart-pounding game of wits. I pretended to yield under pressure and reached a deal with Volokov through an intermediary. The transaction took place at a private bank in Zurich. When I handed him the hard drive containing the algorithm, his gray-blue eyes were full of a victor's arrogance. A wise choice, Miss Sterling. He shook my hand. $200 million has been transferred to your offshore account. A pleasure doing business. A pleasure doing business, I responded with a smile. Watching his retreating figure as he left with his bodyguards, I silently counted in my heart. The countdown begins. 72 hours later. The news dropped a bombshell. Russian energy oligarch Alexander Volokov was raided and arrested by Interpol on his luxury yacht in Monaco. Reportedly, the organization received a mysterious signal that directly pinpointed his location and obtained massive evidence of suspected money laundering and arms dealing from his servers. And that algorithm worth $200 million suddenly failed at the critical moment, turning into worthless gibberish. When Volokov was arrested, he roared my name in fury. But he had no chance left. What awaited him was a lengthy extradition process and a lifetime behind bars. Although VS Future Tech got dragged into some rumors, I had already prepared for this. I proactively submitted all the materials to the relevant authorities, proving that I conducted this sting operation to cooperate with the investigation. It was a bit over the line, but in the face of justice being served, plus my family's maneuvering, I came out unscathed. After this battle, VS Future Tech's international reputation skyrocketed. No one dared to see me as a piece of fat meat to be slaughtered at will anymore. I returned to New York, but I didn't go back to the company, nor did I return to that empty penthouse. I had the driver take the car to the Manhattan Bridge. The night wind howled, and the Hudson River's surface reflected the city's neon lights. I took out a cigarette and lit it. This was a bad habit I'd recently picked up. I only smoke one when I'm extremely exhausted. Through the swirling smoke, I seemed to see that girl from many years ago. That girl wearing a white wedding dress, looking at Joseph with eyes full of longing. That silly girl who didn't hesitate to fight with her father to support her husband's startup, even wanting to sell her own jewelry. That girl who felt like the sky was falling when she discovered the betrayal. She's dead. She died on that Cheeksy night. Died in the smoke of that board meeting, died at the snow-capped peak of Davos. In her place is the current Victoria Sterling, a powerful, ruthless, calculating business queen who is also somewhat lonely. Any regrets? A familiar voice came from behind. It was Dante. I didn't know when he had followed me here, leaning against the railing, also holding a cigarette in his hand. Regret what? I exhaled a smoke ring. Regret sending him to prison? Regret becoming who you are now? I thought about it, flicking the ash off my cigarette. No, I said. I only regret awakening too late. If I hadn't gone through all that, I might have been just a pampered Vass my whole life, never knowing these hands of mine could not only wear diamond rings, but also hold a scepter. Dante smiled, tossing the cigarette butt on the ground and stamping it out. Let's go, Your Majesty. There's a surprise waiting for you. What surprise? You'll know when we get there. He opened the car door and made an inviting gesture. This time, I didn't refuse. The car headed toward an unknown direction. But I wasn't afraid, because I know that no matter what lies ahead, I have the ability to face it, to conquer it. The car stopped in front of an old red brick building in Brooklyn. This was New York's emerging art and tech incubation district, filled with bohemian-style freedom and chaos, completely different from Manhattan's refined aloofness. Where is this? I got out of the car, looking at Dante with some confusion. Go up and see. He smiled mysteriously. We walked into the building and took the slightly shaky old freight elevator to the top floor. The moment the elevator doors opened, loud music and a wave of heat hit us. It was a huge loft space, converted into an open co-working area. Dozens of young people were sitting together, some typing code, some arguing heatedly, some drawing complex sketches on whiteboards. And on the most prominent wall hung a huge neon sign that read, Phoenix Project. I froze. This is your Phoenix Project. Dante walked to my side. Not that fake document used as bait, but a true phoenix rising from the ashes. David Cohen emerged from the crowd, holding a bottle of beer, his face radiating a glow I had never seen before. Victoria, you're finally here! He excitedly pointed at the large screen behind him. Look, this is what we've been working on in our spare time these past few months. What was displayed on the screen was a decentralized distributed computing network. It utilized blockchain technology to connect idle personal computer processing power, providing affordable supercomputing services for small research institutions and startups. When you were pushing reforms within the company, I kept thinking, could we do something that truly breaks monopolies and makes technology accessible to everyone? David said excitedly. I know it's hard to turn around a massive ship like VS, so I privately gathered these geniuses who were laid off by big corporations or didn't want to be cogs in cubicles and started this project here. Dante is our angel investor. David patted Dante's shoulder. He said this is a gift for you. I turned to look at Dante. This tough guy who usually walked the gray areas actually rubbed his nose a bit sheepishly at this moment. I know you've always wanted to prove that you're not just a capitalist, Dante said in a low voice. You want to change the world. VS Tech is your shield, and this place is your dream. My eyes grew a bit moist. This past year, I'd been fighting nonstop. Fighting my ex-husband, fighting love rivals, fighting competitors, fighting the mob. I armed myself to the teeth, keeping my nerves wound tight at all times. I won all the battles, yet almost forgot why I set out in the first place. Thank you, I said softly. Don't rush to thank me. David handed me a beer. Although this project has taken shape, it's lacking money, resources, and a pilot who can help it take off. Victoria, are you interested in joining? I looked at those young, passionate faces with light shining in their eyes. They weren't dressed immaculately like those Wall Street elites, but they had the purest kind of power. That was the power of creation. I took the beer and raised it high. Join? No, I said with a smile. I want to fully acquire it. As an independent lab under VS Future Tech, I'll give you absolute freedom and sufficient funding. We're not just going to break the monopoly, we're going to redefine the rules. To Phoenix! To Phoenix! Cheers echoed throughout the entire loft. At that moment, I seemed to truly see a fiery red phoenix rising from the ashes, illuminating the entire night sky. A few months later, Project Phoenix's first product officially launched, instantly setting the tech world ablaze. With extremely low cost and extremely high efficiency, it helped countless small labs complete complex calculations they never dared to imagine before. VS Future Tech's stock price soared again, with the market value breaking through the $10 billion mark. I stood on the NASDAQ bell-ringing podium, watching confetti flying all around. This time, standing beside me wasn't that hypocritical husband anymore, but David, Dante, and those young partners. After the bell-ringing ceremony ended, I came to Times Square alone. On the giant electronic screen, my exclusive interview was playing. The host asked, "Ms. Sterling, after going through so many ups and downs, what do you think success is?" On the screen, my eyes were firm yet composed. Success isn't about how much wealth you have, nor how many enemies you've defeated. Success is when you stand upon the ruins and still have the courage to plant a rose. It's when you've been through darkness and still choose to believe in the light. It's when you finally understand that you don't need to be anyone's princess or queen. You yourself are the legend. I looked at myself on the screen and smiled. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Dante. "There's a celebration party tonight. Coming?" I thought for a moment and replied, "Of course. But first, come with me somewhere." "Where?" "To get a hot dog. At that stand next to Central Park. I used to think it was too dirty and wouldn't let Joseph eat there, but now I want to try it." "As you command, Your Majesty." I put away my phone and strode into the bustling crowd. The sunlight was just right. The breeze was gentle. My high heels clicked crisply against the hard concrete of Manhattan. This was my rhythm. This was my era. The old Victoria Sterling was dead. The one who is alive now is the new Victoria. Oh no, the one and only me.